Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
When I first saw the email from the HOA, I almost laughed. It was so ridiculous, so completely over the top. I mean, who gets so bent out of shape over holiday decorations? But there it was, plain as day, telling us what we could and couldn't do in our own little piece of property. And I'll be honest, it hit a nerve. They were banning holiday lights. No lights on the balconies, no flags, no decorations that were too obtrusive. But here's the part that really set me off. They had the audacity to tell us we couldn't even put up lights that didn't blink or make a sound. Just a few string lights to add a little sparkle to the season, outlawed. I took that email, printed it out, and marched over to my neighbor Lisa's apartment. If anyone was going to share my irritation, it would be her. Lisa and I had bonded over the HOA's absurdity before. She opened her door, her face already curious. "Did you see this?" I thrust the paper into her hands, and she read it over, her expression shifting from curiosity to frustration. "What on earth?" she finally said, shaking her head. "No holiday lights on our balconies? Since when does a few lights ruin the look of the place?" "Oh, it's beyond lights," I said, barely holding back my sarcasm. "They've basically banned anything that isn't invisible. And don't forget the decorative soul comment. That really got me." Lisa rolled her eyes. "The HOA has lost it. We can't even put something as harmless as a wreath on our doors without someone complaining." By now our voices had attracted another neighbor, Joe, who lived a few doors down. He strolled over, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd just heard the juiciest bit of gossip. "Tell me this isn't about decorations," he said, looking between us. "Oh, it's about decorations, all right," I replied, crossing my arms. "They sent an email saying we can't do anything festive. No lights, no wreaths, not even those little inflatable figures people like to put out." Joe let out a low whistle. "They're going to have a tough time enforcing that one." "Are we supposed to pretend it's not the holiday season at all?" "Pretty much," Lisa muttered. "They've given us November 15th to January 15th to decorate our front doors. Just the doors, mind you. But that's only if it's unobtrusive. And balconies are strictly off limits." The more we talked about it, the more I felt a bubbling determination. This couldn't be allowed to stand. It felt petty, even dictatorial. People needed some holiday spirit in their lives, especially with everything else going on in the world. Why were they sucking the joy out of one of the few things that bring people together? I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to let this go without a fight. The next board meeting was scheduled for the following week, so I started rallying the neighbors. I went door to door, making sure everyone knew about the new rule. Some people shrugged it off. Typical HOA nonsense, they said, but a surprising number were fired up. Lisa and Joe were, of course, all in, and we started forming our own little alliance of residents who wanted to bring back holiday cheer. We were prepared to go head-to-head with the board if it came to that. On the night of the meeting, the board members looked less than pleased to see so many of us crammed into the small room they used for these things. The chairwoman, a woman named Carol who'd probably been around since the complex was built, didn't even try to hide her irritation. "Let's keep this brief," she started, glancing around with an air of exasperation. "I understand there are questions about the new holiday decoration guidelines." Questions? That was putting it mildly. Joe jumped right in, arms crossed over his chest. "Why the sudden crackdown on decorations? We've had lights and wreaths and whatever else for years, and now it's suddenly a problem?" Carol looked at him like he'd just asked the most absurd question in the world. "It's a matter of aesthetics," she said smoothly. "We want to maintain a clean, uniform appearance. It's important for property values." Lisa cut in, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Right, because a few lights and wreaths are going to tank the value of a condo complex." Carol didn't even blink. "The board has voted on this issue, and the rules are final. If you'd like to make an official appeal, we can put it on the agenda for next month, but for now, the guidelines stand." I couldn't hold back anymore. "So that's it, you're telling us we can't even put a string of lights on our balconies because you think it's obtrusive? What harm does a few decorations do?" She gave me this tight-lipped smile, clearly rehearsed. "It's not about harm. It's about maintaining the community standard. People bought into this complex with an expectation of a certain level of decorum." I wanted to laugh. "Decorum? Are you serious? We're talking about holiday decorations, not graffiti." That's when one of the other board members, Bill, decided to chime in. "It's not just about decorum. We have to consider how it affects everyone. What if someone finds flashing lights or inflatables disruptive?" "Oh, for heaven's sake," Joe groaned. No one's talking about covering the place in neon. We're talking about some tasteful decorations for a couple of months out of the year. It's supposed to be festive, not the next Vegas Strip. Carol's mouth twitched, and I could tell we were getting under her skin. She didn't like this challenge, not one bit. "If you find the guidelines too restrictive," she said, "you're free to voice your concerns formally, as I mentioned. But the board's decision is in the best interest of the community." By this point, the room was buzzing with frustration. Someone in the back yelled out, "What community? All you're doing is killing what little spirit we have left." I felt a surge of support from the crowd, and for the first time, I thought we might actually have a chance at pushing back. But Carol wasn't budging. She kept that frosty, calm demeanor, like she was above all of us, like we were just kids throwing a tantrum. After the meeting, we regrouped in the hallway. The consensus was clear. We weren't going to take this lying down. If the board thought they could ignore us, they had another thing coming. Over the next few days, we started brainstorming ways to push back. Lisa suggested we start a petition, and Joe had the idea to document every single decoration around the complex. We wanted to show that a few lights and wreaths weren't some massive eyesore, like Carol wanted everyone to believe. I took charge of gathering signatures, going door to door and explaining our mission. Most people were on board, though a few were too scared of the board to sign. But slowly, we gathered a respectable number of names. We even started planning a little malicious compliance, as someone in our group suggested. Instead of traditional holiday decorations, people started getting creative. We put out miniature LED candles, small enough to be almost invisible from a distance. Some people hung holiday cards on their doors. Joe even wrapped his balcony railing in garland, leaving off the lights but making it clear that he wasn't going to just sit back and let the HOA dictate every last detail. When Carol and the board saw what we were doing, they were livid. I could tell by the next email blast that they were starting to feel the heat. They sent out another stern warning about unapproved decorations, but this time they were met with resistance. People weren't taking them down, and some even dared to add more. One neighbor, who'd stayed quiet during the whole process, suddenly put up a tasteful wreath and a small set of non-flashing lights around her doorway. Eventually, Carol reached out to me personally, likely hoping to squash this rebellion at its source. She invited me to a private discussion about the decorations. It was, in her words, a chance to work things out. When I arrived at the office, I could see she was annoyed, probably regretting that she'd have to stoop to talk to a resident over something as trivial as holiday decor. She started with a long-winded speech about community harmony and how they had the authority to enforce the rules. I kept quiet, letting her talk herself in circles. Finally, she stopped, probably expecting me to back down. Instead, I asked her point blank, "What's the real reason for this crackdown? Because it's not about aesthetics, and we both know it." Her eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward. "This isn't just about you or your little group. It's about what's best for everyone." "Funny," I shot back, "because all I see is you imposing what you think is best without caring what anyone else actually wants." She bristled, but I held my ground. There was a long silence, and for the first time, I could see that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to realize this wasn't going to end the way she'd planned. In the end, Carol and the board didn't change their minds, but they couldn't stop us from our subtle rebellion. That year, our building didn't have the typical flashing lights or loud holiday music, but every door was decorated, every window had a small candle or two, and our balconies, though bare of lights, had wreaths and garlands. It wasn't the victory I'd hoped for, but seeing all those tiny acts of defiance made it feel like we'd won something bigger. Geez, what's the penalty for just doing what you want? Like, don't be obnoxious, but some cute string lights or poinsettias shouldn't really be that big of a deal. If you're not planning on going overboard or making your deck look like Dollywood, I'd just go for it, and for forgiveness instead of permission. And somehow that email went straight to my spam folder. Crazy, right? Sounds very reasonable for a group of hateful old ladies. Yes, the HOA is fully within their rights to enforce such rules, as holiday decorations aren't protected anyway, and many have rules about when the decorations have to be down by. Man, these HOA folks need to lighten up. It's like they're allergic to joy or something. I mean, come on, a few twinkling lights and a wreath aren't going to bring down the neighborhood. What's next? Banning smiles and laughter. I say we all chip in and buy the board members some festive sweaters. Maybe that'll thaw their frozen hearts. And if they try to fine us for spreading a little holiday cheer, we'll just tell them Santa put us on the naughty list and we're rebelling. Seriously though, life's too short to let a bunch of rules suck all the fun out of the holidays. I'm gonna deck my halls, or at least my door, and dare them to say something. Who's with me in this tinsel rebellion?
If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
Living in a townhouse with one wall connected to a neighbor was supposed to be a peaceful setup. My own little slice of space without feeling too boxed in. But this HOA, let me tell you, turned what should have been a straightforward process into a saga. My house sits at the end of the row, so I'm only sharing one wall, unlike the unlucky few in the middle who have neighbors on both sides. I'd been thinking about adding a fence and some gutters for privacy and to keep water runoff under control. Seemed simple enough, right? 2 months back, I went ahead and filed an ARC Architectural Review Committee request with the HOA. I dotted every I and crossed every T. The form was a mini novel at that point. I included sketches, materials, and exact measurements. I figured they'd appreciate the detail. A couple of weeks after submitting it, I get this message from the board with a list of questions. The kicker, nearly every question they asked was already answered in my original form, except for 2 new ones. What color would the fence be once stained, and what color would the gutters be? I thought this was a bit nitpicky, but whatever. I replied, clarifying that the fence would be stained cedar and the gutters would be white. Neither color was in any of the HOA guidelines, so I didn't expect it to be a big deal. After another month of silence, I had to nudge them. It was like sending a message into a void and hoping for a response. Finally, they approved the project. I was relieved, thinking the headache was over. I scheduled the installations, paid the deposits, and felt a bit of excitement. Something was actually going to get done around here. But that was short-lived. The day before the gutter installation, my contractor calls. "We have a problem," he says. Apparently, the HOA president himself had shown up at the property and pulled my contractor aside. The president didn't just ask for a minor tweak. He insisted that the gutters extend onto my neighbor's property by about 5 feet. 5 feet, my contractor, looking more confused than anything, asked if I knew about this. "Nope, first I'm hearing of it," I told him. So there I was, sending off a terse email to the HOA, explaining that it was wildly inappropriate for the president to make demands on my project without even talking to me first. Late that evening, the HOA property manager emails me. I could feel the tension already as I clicked it open. She rattled off a list of issues they had with my project. First, the gate. Apparently, my gate was the wrong size. According to them, it needed to be exactly 48 inches wide, so I went out with my tape measure, pacing around in the twilight. From post to post it was 48.5 inches, close enough, right? The gate itself was exactly 48 inches. I shot an email back, describing the measurement in painstaking detail, complete with decimals, thinking that would appease them. Next up, they had an issue with the gutter color. They claimed it was wrong, yet they didn't specify what the right color was supposed to be. I mean, what does that even mean? I reached out to the property manager, asking if she had any clarification. She just replied with a vague line about uniformity, and asked me to submit my paint colors for the board's review. Paint colors. For gutters. I wanted to laugh, but this was so absurd it was almost infuriating. Not wanting to be caught off guard, I dug through the HOA documents, looking for anything on gutter colors. 5 years of documents, some yellowed from age, but there was not one line mentioning gutter colors. Just that they need to look the same, whatever that means. Most of the gutters in our complex had faded over time anyway, from beige to almost off-white depending on the building's age and the sun exposure. The next morning I get a call. It's from the HOA president himself. "We need to talk about these gutters," he says, his tone oozing with that "I'm in charge here" attitude. "You've installed white gutters, and that's just not in line with the look we're going for." I could feel my patience wearing thin. "White is what I submitted in my original request," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Yes, well, that might be what you submitted, but it's not what was approved," he retorted, clearly thinking he had the upper hand. "Oh really?" I shot back. "Then what was approved exactly? Because white was the only color I submitted, and it was clearly approved." There was a pause on his end. "And while we're at it, why did you ask my contractor to extend the gutters onto my neighbor's property without informing me?" "Oh that," he said, like it was some trivial detail. "We just thought it would look better that way, more cohesive." The nerve, he was talking about it as though I was the unreasonable one. "I'm not paying extra to have my gutters spread across my neighbor's property just because you think it looks better," I said, my patience now down to fumes. "And let me remind you, I'm not going to make changes based on personal opinions. I followed the rules, got the approval, and installed it as specified. I'd appreciate it if you'd honor that. There was silence. Then, in a tone that suggested he was doing me a favor, he said, "Fine. I'll bring it up with the board at the next meeting, but don't get your hopes up. We have standards to uphold." Standards. Right. The HOA's standards seemed to be whatever they decided on a whim. Then came another message from the property manager. "The board would like you to resubmit your plans with adjusted measurements and paint colors for the gutters." I could hardly believe my eyes. I sent a response back, and I'll admit it had a few choice words in it. I said, "The plans were already submitted, reviewed, and approved. The project is done, paid for, and installed. I'm not changing a thing based on vague standards no one seems to know. If there's a problem, you should have brought it up during the approval process, not now when it's all finished." I didn't get a response, but I did get a notice in the mail a week later, an official violation notice. It stated in bureaucratic lingo that my fence and gutters were out of compliance with HOA standards and gave me a 30-day deadline to remedy the situation. Remedy it. After all the approval, after the install, after they went behind my back to my contractor. I called the property manager. "Listen," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "The approval is on record and I followed every rule. This so-called violation is nonsense." "Well," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "sometimes changes are necessary to ensure uniformity." Uniformity? I nearly laughed. Uniformity wasn't mentioned in the approval. I submitted everything. The HOA had ample time to raise concerns. "Well, the board has discussed this at length, and they feel it's in the best interest of the community that you make the changes." The way she emphasized "feel" was infuriating. Feelings now dictated what got done. "I'm not making changes," I said firmly. "If you want to pursue this, be my guest, but I have the documentation, and I won't back down." There was a long pause, and then she hit me with a veiled threat about fines, insinuating they could tack on additional fees for every day I refused to comply. So it began, a ridiculous back and forth. I'd get emails nearly every day, each one sounding more like a threat than a request. My inbox was clogged with their passive-aggressive messages, and every time I replied it felt like they escalated things just to make a point. Then came the HOA meeting. I decided to attend. When I walked in, all the board members looked at me as if I were some kind of rebel. I wasn't there to make friends, that's for sure. The president opened the floor, his smug face barely hiding his annoyance. "You're here to discuss the gutter situation, correct?" "Oh, I'm here for a lot more than that," I replied, refusing to play nice. I laid out my case, from the pointless delays to their overreach with my contractor, to their last-minute demands after the project was done. I could see some of the other homeowners nodding, but the board members, arms crossed, lips tight, they were digging in their heels. The president tried to cut me off, but I wasn't having it. "This is my property," I told him, "and I followed your rules to the letter. If the HOA board wants to waste everyone's time and money over a few inches of fence and a color you can't even specify, then I guess we'll be seeing each other in court." That seemed to shake them a bit. There were murmurs among the homeowners, and I could tell I wasn't the only one fed up with this nonsense. The president muttered something about continuing discussions, but it was clear they didn't want this battle to go public. Still, I knew better than to trust they'd back off completely. "As long as everything falls within your CC&Rs, I would go forward with your project," which was approved. The president nor the manager have any authority to alter the board or ARC's decision or to stop your contractor. You have an approval letter based on plans that specified the colors, and your contractor used that exact color specified. Then they can pound sand. If you went rogue on the colors or did anything additional or different from the approved plans, then you need to make it match the plan. They can't Monday morning quarterback your previously approved project if they had other requirements that should have been clarified before they issue approval. Sounds like your HOA is overstepping big time. They approved your plans and now they're trying to change the game after you've already started. That's not how it works. If they had issues, they should have brought them up before giving you the green light. The fact that they're making up rules about gutter colors that don't even exist in their guidelines is ridiculous. And trying to extend your gutters onto your neighbor's property without even talking to you, that's a whole new level of absurd. Stand your ground and remind them of their own approval. If they keep pushing, you might want to consider getting some legal advice. HOAs can be a pain, but they can't just make up rules on the fly or ignore their own decisions. Good luck dealing with this mess.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.